Right, this is to explain how to synchronise the cables on the Senator A and Monza sunroof. Assuming that you've got the tracking in, as you can see here, not forgetting the trim panel. This draft deflector I normally leave off until last. I haven't actually removed this from the donor car yet, so you've got to imagine that we've just put it in, except possibly for this bit. And the most important thing is to leave the gearbox off, whether it's electric or manual, so that the cables are free to move in the tracking. And then what you do is you push the cable back carefully on both sides, one at a time, until it gets to this position here, which is 21 millimetres between the rear edge of this sliding shoe and this wide slot here. Do that on both sides. I like to push them back rather than faff around doing like that, because if you push them forward and then push them back, you then take up the slack. The next thing is to adjust the winder so that it's in the sunroof closed position. I should have explained that this setup is with the sunroof closed. So basically you just turn the winder around. If there's a long wind, then obviously you're winding the sunroof back. Alright, and then it'll click. At least it will if it works properly. I think this one's jammed a bit. But basically, if you do a short wind and it clicks, you then know that you've simulated going from the sunroof tilted position to the closed. Then you put the winder in position and screw it up under here, which then locks the tracking in place and it can't move. You've then got the winder synchronised with the tracking, and the tracking in the right place for the sunroof closed. The electric version is exactly the same, except that instead of having to physically wind it, you simply apply some current to the motor and let the motor wind around until you hear it click at the appropriate point. You can then take the sunroof panel and position it in the aperture and fit the two Phillips screws, one at the front and one at the rear, on each side. You'll note that the one at the rear has got a sort of ribbed effect here, which allows you to adjust it up and down. Also, you can see the hole is slotted. The one at the front is also slotted, but fore and aft. And the reason for that is so that this arm and this sliding block, basically imagine that the sunroof panel is now fixed to the sliding block. It allows you to take up any play fore and aft in the sunroof in its aperture. So you get the sunroof fitted nicely seated in the aperture. I like to try and put a bit of pressure on it and push it forward a bit to try and take up any slack, because there's a tendency at the rear for the weather seal to sort of catch as it goes down. So I push it forward a little bit, and then I do up this screw here, which then locks the metal panel in position fore and aft. The height adjustment, according to the workshop manual, the front of the panel is supposed to be 1 millimetre below the roof line and the back 1 millimetre high. And you can adjust that down here at the front using this knurled wheel. As you can see, as you screw it, it comes out, and adjust the height. At the back you can see again that this little lug has got ribs on it to help lock it in place once you've adjusted the height. One final thing which actually comes before all this really, is when you're assembling this rear rain gutter into the tracking, this bit here, which is a spring-loaded locking device, is often bent. In fact, on this one it's bent from age and fatigue. You need to get a pair of long-nosed pliers and carefully bend it back like this so that it's more level and locking in this little slot properly. Basically what this does is it locks the sunroof in position when it's closed, so it can't move backwards and forwards for any reason. Going on from that, when you then decide to move the sunroof, when you decide to open the sunroof so that it moves back underneath the roof, the first thing that happens is it drops down and this L-shaped lug here drops through the slot where my fingernail is. At least it does in theory. If for some reason this is in the wrong place, what tends to happen is that this jams and eventually snaps off, which is the reason why a lot of these sunroofs don't work properly and are tilted down at one corner. So when you've got to the stage where you've got the roof in place, roof panel in place, one of the first things you've got to do is gently use the handle, the winder handle, to just let the roof drop down slightly and make sure that this lug is going down in the right position. If it isn't, you can adjust it. On the back there's a little screw where my thumbnail is and a little slot, so you can move it backwards and forwards slightly. Don't over tighten it because the metal is quite brittle and it will tend to snap if you do it up too tight. There's a natural tendency to want to do it tight because you're frightened that it's going to come loose. But on the other hand, if you do that, it's going to snap anyway. So you have to be very careful. Do that on both sides and use the winder handle to check that as the sunroof drops down, these lugs are going through the slots without jamming. Their purpose, once they're underneath the tracking, is to hold the sunroof down and stop it lifting up against the main roof panel. Going on from that, on 2 or 3 Monzas that we've restored, we found that this roof panel here, which actually is quite flimsy, has been depressed downwards, probably by rather over-vigorous rubbing down when respraying the car. And what's happened is that this panel has got bent downwards, and the sunroof, as it's retracted back, has scraped all the brand new paintwork off. So you need to check that. It's a bit difficult to specify any dimensions. You just have to be very, very careful when you're first assembling the sunroof, and if it looks as if this is too low, then you've got to find a way of lifting it up. What I did, I found some camping pillows, inflatable camping pillows, and put them underneath and inflated them, which had the effect of lifting the whole roof up. To test it, I used bits of newspaper between the panel here and the sunroof panel, so that if it does catch, hopefully it won't actually touch the paintwork. I think that's about it.